Well, hello, I'm here with Doug to talk about fiery fuel spaghetti and other things. It's Friday, May 24th, 2024. So go ahead, Doug, what have you got?
Yeah, so Sam, this is an interesting one. This is section 230.
Right.
And if you remember about a decade ago, maybe it wasn't quite, we had Unsubscribe All. That was an app that was created by somebody out of the UK, if I'm not mistaken. And the idea behind that is if you're in Facebook and you don't want to have all the pop-ups and everything, you had an app that you could run that was Unsubscribe All, and that would unsubscribe you. Facebook, and what that would do is reduce the ads, greatly reduce the number of ads that you're receiving, which of course would make Facebook unhappy. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So Facebook comes back and says you need to remove it, the app, and if you don't, we'll give you a life ban, so you can never be part of Facebook again. Okay, so that's where it's been for a while. But then we've got a professor, and I think he's on the East Coast, Cornell. I might be wrong on that, but he teaches cyber law, and he'd been teaching this for about 10 years. And finally, he was reading through the articles or the section 230, and he found a section that's pretty interesting that says, let me see here. Trying to get the quote here. So it protects users of online service providers from being sued. Oh, and by the way, Facebook was going to sue him if he didn't take down the app. So he immediately took it down. Okay. So it protects users of online service providers from being sued for efforts that make to try and filter content and make content safer for themselves or others. So that's pretty straightforward, that somebody can create an app that's a filter that makes it safer for you or others, which is in direct opposition to what Facebook is doing.
Yeah, I was surprised
So,
to see that. I never heard of that. All I ever heard about Section 230 was it protected the company.
right, right. So this protects app providers. Now, the question is the lawsuit, and if somebody has enough money to go up against Facebook.
Yeah, yeah, but he that's very interesting. And it does tie into the thing I've been studying, uh,
Yeah,
which is the safety of large language models. Now, there's
yeah,
a bunch of the hilarious one that's been going around for the last day is you can go in until today, you could go into Google search and you could type in how many rocks should I eat per day? And it would tell you should eat one rock per day because it found that in an Onion article. And if you say I'm depressed, it would say, oh, one Redditor recommends jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge if you're depressed. And if you asked it, can I cook spaghetti faster by putting gasoline in it? They'd have the recipe for fiery fuel spaghetti that was AI generated on another recipe site of how to cook spaghetti with gasoline in it. And this gets close to, the whole issue. All these AIs do is they search the internet and find what's on the internet. A bunch of what's on the internet is horrible crap. And they don't have
yeah,
sense. So they don't know how to tell the garbage from the good stuff. And and this is related. There was a study where they tested and found that I found all current models that they tested are vulnerable to prompt injection. You can have a carefully phrased question and get them to violate their security policies. And so Google apparently wised up after about a day of us all doing this, and now it seems to not answer hardly any of these questions anymore. But I went to Microsoft Bing and tried it, and Microsoft has effectively blocked all of these. You try any of these there, it will say, no, don't put gasoline in your food. Here's 10 reasons not to put gasoline in your food, and things like that. So it is possible, I guess, to have content moderation for at least these obvious things, but it's a huge problem. And I know there were all these political wars about how do you handle disinformation, like practically everything that comes from the Murdoch empire. newspapers that
Yeah.
put out false statements and Donald Trump that puts out false statements. You would like to have a search engine that doesn't give you false results. But how is it ever supposed to do it when you have famous newspapers and the number one news source in America putting out false statements? How is your search engine supposed to compensate for that?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting time. I've got a couple other related topics on similar
Yeah,
other stories. So this kind of leads into my second one.
yeah.
And who's the most famous polling organization in the United States? It's been around for years.
Gallup.
Nielsen. Yeah,
O'Neill.
Nielsen, Gallup. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for years, if we go back 50, 100 years, they would walk door to door and poll people about political candidates, what their feelings are, and political issues. Then once the telephone came along, they started using the phone. Then the internet came along and they realized that they were being played. And so they switched over to cell phones, because cell phones, it's kind of reliable if you're the poller. It's kind of difficult if you're impersonating a cell phone as a recipient, right? Most people don't do that because there's no reason to do that. You agree? Yeah.
No reason to do what?
In other words, there's no reason to falsify who you are if somebody's calling you.
I guess, but I never enter any polls that come on.
Yeah, right. And this leads into what the issue is. People are not answering cell phones. When they're being told, they think it's a scam. So all political data right now by all these polls is total bullshit. It's all garbage.
Well, in principle, if you
Yes.
could somehow estimate what the bias is in sampling, you could try to compensate, but it's going to be tough.
But there's no way. They can't tell between AI people or AI and people. They have no idea what's going on.
Well, nobody has AI answering the cell phone, do they?
No. I'm just saying for the poll data, that the poll data is so skewed that it's unreliable right now. So what they've been doing, the methods that they've been using statistically have been good enough. But now it's useless. The data is completely useless. That's where I'm going with that.
Well, I've heard a lot of political people argue that the polls are as accurate as they've ever been, but certainly they're more difficult. And I mean, the question is, how do you get a representative sample of people? And you don't really need to have a perfectly representative sample, but you need to understand what the flaws are in your sample and compensate for it.
Right. And what they're saying is there are too many flaws. The data is unreliable.
Well, I guess we'll see. I know
Yeah.
next election, for example, we can compare the actual results to the polls and see how close they were. But I'm afraid there are an awful lot of reasons why it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
A lot of people not only don't answer the phone, but they hate this and they might lie to them, and certain categories of people might ignore the phone more than others.
Yeah. And what they've said in the past, they've been able to get a pretty good fair sampling.
Yeah.
But now it's too skewed. They can't get that fair sample that
Well,
they feel is reliable.
Well, I wonder what would happen if they just went back to paying you $5 to take the poll. That might get people to do it again.
Maybe.
And, more people might answer the phone if they knew if they called the same person every month and they knew they were going to get $5 for filling it out. That might do it.
Yeah.
That's what the
All
Gallup did, right? Their gadgets. They pay people to put this gadget on your television to see what you're watching. And
Yeah,
be reliable.
Our family became part of the Nielsen rating.
That was it, Nielsen, yeah.
Yeah, and Nielsen came out, they installed boxes on the TVs. They showed us how to use the remote. And they actually spent, I think, 2 or 3 hours installing it all. This was probably 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And I said, we have a replay TV or a TiVo, and we're able to do time shifting as well as automatic commercial shift or deletion, skip over.
Oh.
So they said, okay, you can't be part of it. We're ripping everything out.
I would think so, yes. And that's, of course, the modern problem. I haven't had a TV in what, a decade or more. I haven't watched anything even remotely in real time. I don't even look at a show until it's like 5 or 6 seasons piled up so I can watch it.
Yeah, you want to live stream, you want to be able to skip over commercials, ads, all that stuff, right?
Yeah, so I don't know. The whole philosophy of those ratings is kind of shot.
Yeah, yeah. So, we'll
And
see.
you know,
We'll see.
but Amazon totally knows what I'm watching. So I mean, they have all the data anyway they need.
Well, isn't that yeah, right, right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
Well,
right. What else you got for us?
all right. So the IoT devices remain horrible. There's something called the ThruTech Calais platform, which apparently has huge flaws and has been used for millions of IoT devices. And I tried to read up on it, and I still can't understand exactly what it is. I think it's either the operating system or it's some kind of app that runs on top of the operating system. But apparently, if you're building a smart light bulb or something, you can use this software to make the controller for your light bulb, and everybody does. And it turns out to have some outrageous security flaws like you would expect. I think, yeah, authenticated system commands as the root user, a stack-based buffer overflow, she can gain root access and so on, all the usual stuff.
Yeah, usual stuff.
And there's another guy that wrote about how he upgraded his water heater. He upgraded his water heater and new water heater. He found he had an on-demand water heater. And the problem is you had to let the water run a lot for it to get hot. But if you upgraded to the one you could control from your smartphone, you could tell it, I want hot water in 5 minutes. And it would heat up so you get hot water right away after the delay. And you could even program it to like turn on the heat like right before you get up in the morning and stuff. But when he did that, he investigated the API and he found that the API all you need to know is the email address of the user. There's no password or anything. So you could turn on everybody else's water heater and make the water hot when they don't want it to be, and perhaps even burn down their house or something. And this just happens over and over and over. People just make code and they test it for functionality. And when it works under normal conditions, they say, okay, we're done. And I should say, this is what Microsoft's official position was until 2002. Bill Gates wrote a memo and said, just don't worry about hackers and security. That's just a waste of time. We'll just make products that work under normal conditions so people can get their work done, like
Yeah,
Microsoft Office. And it wasn't until the 2002 memo he said, well, this is really not working. We actually need to make secure stuff.
yeah,
And so the IoT device is still in the pre-2002 era, where all they do is make it function under normal circumstances, and then they sell it. And they don't think about little details like what could go wrong and how to update it later and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So another IoT flaw, this one's a major one. This one seems like it's back from the 1970s, where you put in a username, it's hard coded in, or you don't need a password or a hard coded password. Silly, right? That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
We should know better by now, is what I'm getting at.
Oh, and CISA just came out with official recommendations for new devices saying you should not do this anymore. So, maybe devices made from this point forward might get better, but the problem is you have a huge legacy infrastructure of all this old.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of which, my next story here, this is out in New Jersey. This is kind of interesting. This deals with slot machines in a casino. And have you heard this story?
No.
So a woman who's been, again, this is in New Jersey. She's playing the Wheel of Fortune slot machine. She's been playing it for a long time. Finally, she hits the jackpot, and meaning that she's a winner. And the slot machine says, "You're a winner," computer generated voice. This is not with wheels. It's a video, machine.
Yeah.
And then it says you get the double bonus, or the, double bonus thing. And so she spins the wheel again, or the wheel spins. I'm not exactly sure how it works. And it comes back, lands on the jackpot, and it says, "You're a winner." And people around her are saying, "Lady, you just won $1.2 million." They look up at it. She pushes the button to call the attendant to come over. And then you know what happens, Sam? Tilt, tilt, tilt. So the attendant comes over, looks at it, and says, "No, you didn't win." And people are saying, "Yeah, she did. We heard the machine say you won." So then, wait, the story gets better. So they said, lady, thank you for gambling with us. You didn't win. Now leave the casino. Get out. So lawsuits are going, right? Video surveillance camera is going to be very important. The
Yeah.
eyes in the sky in the casino. Now, one would think that this is maybe a fluke and probably has never happened. This is one of those things, it's an event like a jackpot that rarely occurs. Well, if we go to Louisiana in 2000, in 2000, casino there, same machine, exact same thing happened. And it took about 10 years for the lawsuit to go through. And the casino, it went to a jury trial, I should add that. And the jury said, look, casino, the guy won. The machine said you won.
Yeah.
Why are you not paying? And the judge said, so it was a unanimous verdict by the jury. And the judge kind of said, casino, what the heck do you think? They won. Just pay them.
Yeah.
So interesting lawsuit there.
Yeah. I mean, I would think there'd be an interesting legal argument when does the machine lighting up constitute a legal contract to pay? And I guess the ultimate decision is yes.
Yeah, but here's something that's interesting from a legal aspect on this. So the advertisements are come and play our machines. So those are the ads on TV, wherever they're, billboards, whatever. They say come and play. The important word here is our machines. So now that the lawsuit's going forward, the casino is saying, wait a minute, these aren't our machines. We subcontract out the slot machines and the gaming portion. We're just responsible for the facility, so don't sue us. So both parties are in the lawsuit here is what's going on.
Yeah, well, that one makes sense too. Like I remember when people started going to the cloud, this was a big issue because they interviewed people that had put their stuff in the cloud and they said, oh, Amazon is providing security. And Amazon's terms of assurance said, absolutely not. All we're doing is saying the machine will stay up. As far as the software and data, that is your responsibility.
Yeah. So Sam, this reminds me of a story back in the 80s when the slot machines or the gaming machines were going to electronic. And I don't know if you remember this story, but there was a Nevada gaming commissioner, or he was the one that would inspect slot machines, gaming machines, to verify they had not been tampered with. And he was pretty early on in electronics. Again, this is the transition from mechanical to electronic. And he would find ways that people were cheating the slot machines. So it turns out that these goes back to the days of EPROMs and programming EPROMs. And so once somebody would win, he would remove the EPROM, bring it back to the state facility for testing. But in the meantime, he'd put in a new EPROM or replacement EPROM that was certified good, put the machine back in service for the casino. So it turns out he found out a flaw in the Keno machine. Do you know this story?
No.
Okay. So he found out there was a flaw in the Keno machine. And I believe in the history of the casino in Keno, no one has ever gotten all 10 numbers. In the history of playing, I don't know how long Keno has been around.
Well, that would make sense, yeah.
Yeah, nobody has hit all 10 numbers.
Yeah.
And the idea behind that is you have to pick 10 numbers out of 80. And it's kind of like a bingo where the balls pop up, one ball out of 80. So it's virtually impossible.
Right.
But he found a flaw. And the flaw was that if you knew what the previous numbers were, you had a 33% chance predicting what the next 10 numbers that would come up with.
Yeah.
So being a gaming commissioner, he's prohibited from playing slot machines, engaging in any kind of gaming. So he and his buddy decided to fly to New Jersey. He took his computer, went to the hotel room. His buddy went down, put $1 in, $1, and he hit all 10 numbers. And the gaming commissioner got scared because he didn't think it would happen that quickly. Jumps on a plane, heads back to Nevada, Well, his buddy, who actually played it, who can legally play it, they came up to him and they thought, well, something's kind of suspicious, but where do you want the money? You know, the $10 million you just won. And he said, oh, credit it to my buddy's account in the hotel
Yeah.
who's staying with me.
Yeah.
And then they realized he was the gaming commissioner and the story unraveled.
Yeah.
But interesting story because he was also fixing slot machines in Vegas. And he'd tell people if you put in $1, put in $5, $1, $5, $1, the next one would be a jackpot. You know, some scheme like that.
Well, all this makes me respect Sharia law. In Islamic Sharia law, you are not allowed to earn any money unless you actually did some work to justly earn that money. You're not allowed to do any of this gambling nonsense. And I'm pretty much for that. This is all totally crooked.
Yes. All right, what do you got for us? What's your next story?
Well, so VMware got bought by Broadcom, and everybody freaked out and said this is going to be terrible. And apparently that is true. Now, as a teacher, I was sort of reassured when they announced last week they're going to continue to have a free version, VMware Fusion Workstation, which is nice. But apparently they increased the price of the industrial version by a factor of 10.
Really?
Yeah, they said we're going to take the price right up to the pain point of you take the maximum we think we can extract before they'll leave. And so one company just left with 24,000 VMs, and they're moving to something called Nutanix, which I never heard of, but apparently Nutanix is an alternative for, I guess, VMware's enterprise ESXi, I'm guessing, or something of that nature, vSphere and all that. So
yeah, I'm familiar with Nutanix. They've been around. I thought they were a hardware company.
Yeah, they apparently they're an alternative to VMware, and that's where people are going.
Yeah, interesting.
So people I'm reading on Mastodon, people say previous acquisitions by Broadcom have just been destroyed. This is not good, and so this VMware going down.
Yes, but it's the same story with Norton, isn't it? Remember Symantec, all the products that they bought, Norton antivirus, the Symantec security suite, all that stuff. Once Symantec got a hold of it, that was kind of the end.
Yeah, well, it's looking pretty bad.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So Nutanix, huh? So here's one. We have a trainer who's been training cops, police officers, on fighting crypto crime and cybersecurity. And it turns out that on the back end, he's running $100 million dark web drug market.
So he's qualified. He knows how it works.
He's qualified. So he's got busted for this. I guess FBI is involved. And just to be clear, he was training the St. Lucia. St. Lucia is a Caribbean island. He was training their police officers. But still, you can only laugh about this, but reminds me of somebody else. Do you remember? What was his name? Keep talking, Sam. Let me think.
I remember the guy at City College that was a civic IT pro. She gave a talk. In fact, I gave it. He was the so-called security expert, and he had been training FBI experts. And what he did was he had a buddy that would go make a fake virus outbreak so he could then make money by pretending to clear it off. And he hit right at our college.
All right. So reminds me of the story of Barry Minkow. You ever heard of Barry Minkow?
I've heard the name, but I forget.
If you were in Southern California, you would definitely know Barry Minkow. And he was in high school, and he started he started a company called ZZZZY, carpet cleaning service. Yeah. Turns out it was a big scam, but he was able to franchise it or get enough business that he was on the stock market in high school. And shortly after high school, he was invited to Wall Street to ring the bell. And so they brought it in, and he rang the bell, and finally some auditors started going through it, and they realized, wait a minute, these invoices kind of look fake. So he was arrested, thrown in jail, 8 years, 10 years he spent in Club Fed. But while he was there, he he started learning about YouTube and making YouTube videos, and he also became a pastor. So he gets out of prison, goes to San Diego, California, becomes a pastor of a church, and the FBI goes, Barry, you're pretty good at this, finding false invoices and stuff. Why don't you come work for us? Who does that remind you of? Frank Abagnale, right? Catch Me If You Can.
Lots of people like this. Yeah.
So Barry is now preaching to his church. The people in the church love him. He triples, quadruples the attendance. Finds out that a number of people there are contractors that are getting stiffed by Lennar Homes, or there's some issue. At the same time, he's helping the FBI with cybercrime. At the same time, he's making YouTube videos of extortion. So he's extorting companies with the threat that I'm going to put a YouTube video up. Your stock is going to be devalued. And so people are paying him while he's helping the FBI.
Yeah.
Finally, and he gets the idea that he wants to make a movie about his life. And so he starts producing the movie. He gets Mark Hamill from Star Wars fame to be Barry. He writes the script, which everybody has said is absolutely horrible, but he needs another couple $1 million to finish the movie. He doesn't quite have enough. So he goes after Lennar Homes. Lennar Homes is a home builder. They build subdivisions. They've been around for a number of years. So he calls up Lennar Homes, says, I'm going to make your stock go down with a YouTube video. And unless you pay me $6 million. So Lennar Homes, essentially, the lawyer says, up yours, do it. We're going to fight you. So Barry comes back and says, well, if 6 million is too much, how about 3 million? So Lennar says, screw you. Then Barry comes down to 2 million. And the lawyer who's talking to Barry is saying, what kind of ransom discount is this? Whoever discounts on a ransom payment.
Well, from what I understand, ransomware people do discount all the time.
Do they?
Oh, yeah, that's why people pay for experts to negotiate, and you can actually negotiate them pretty far down.
Anyway, so Barry finally comes down to $500,000.
Yeah.
And they say, screw it. So Barry posts the video. The stock does go down by about 40%. But the FBI, yeah, that's a big hit for Lennar Homes. So, Lennar is a trusted company. It's been around for years. And it really did harm a lot of people because their investments went down, right? Portfolios, retirement funds, things like that. So there was actual harm.
I'm surprised because when I watch real scandals, like when a company has a major security breach, their stock will go down by like 5% for a few days and then come back. It doesn't seem to really do any lasting harm.
It dropped for about a week, but if you panicked and you sold off with a 40% loss, I can understand that. Yeah. Anyway, FBI got Barry and they realized that he was being scammed, meaning the FBI was being scammed at the same time.
Oh, the FBI gets scammed a lot. And remember, there was in the Silk Road, there was the FBI agent that just stole the Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So this is the thing, you can't trust anybody. That's why I'm all for the modern zero trust model,
Yeah, zero trust.
All these people, you say, oh, because he's a priest, we should trust him. Oh, because he's in the FBI, we should trust him. They say, well, it'd be better to be like Ronald Reagan, trust but verify,
Yeah. So long story short, Barry wound up back in Club Fed again. And I think he was released 2019, 2020. So we'll see if he pops up again.
Well, I think remember what Kevin Mitnick said? He said it's like a disease, like gambling. He said, I know I'm getting in trouble, but I can't stop hacking. I think these other guys, once you're a con man, it's like an addiction.
Yeah. So sort of a tangent story. There's somebody in New York that has a disease, like you said, but his disease is he doesn't like it that people are getting away without paying bridge tolls by masking their license plate. So they put a cover over the license plate, or I've seen where people put little reflective strip tapes on the license plate to confuse it. I don't know if that works, but other people will put the license plate on an angle, like a screw is missing. They put a shield over it, a cover over it. So he decided took it upon himself to fix these license plates. He said, these people should be paying the $15, whatever it is, to
Yeah.
cross the bridge. And they shouldn't be allowed to park in places like that are reserved for special, like handicapped, disabled people. So he's been running around fixing these license plates in New York. And he finally got arrested because he was fixing the license plate of somebody who was in the car that happened to be a police officer who called the police. Now the police, they arrest him. This is interesting, for vandalism, but he was fixing, right? His argument, I'm fixing what was vandalized. I'm correcting a mistake.
Yeah.
So case got thrown out, but the news picked up on this. And what's interesting about this story is 80% of the people who have an altered license plate are either police officers, correction officers, or they work for the court. So these are the people who are enforcing the laws.
But they're the ones that understand the system, so they know how to subvert it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of the cop shows I watch on Amazon, where it's actually a cop committing the crime who knows how to falsify the evidence and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, this is logical. I mean, this is like I remember in around Server 2000, Microsoft came out with, before, I think up through Server 2000, Microsoft had encryption. And they said, of course, if the user can't log in, the administrator can just punch through the encryption. And then they said, we really need to fix that because the domain administrator is not really the person that should be able to read everything on the whole network. That's like the founder or CEO. That's not really the same thing as a technical person. So, that's the thing. Once somebody has power, and this is why you have to have high privilege audits in your company. You have to watch what are the administrators doing, because they could really do bad things and really cover the tracks, and you can't just trust them. And we're seeing the same thing right now in the country at large. The Supreme Court is blatantly corrupt. And the problem is there is nobody above the Supreme Court. Who watches the watchers? Well, they're at the top. There's nobody above them to punish them for doing bad things. This is like a fundamental flaw in the system.
Yeah. Yeah. So this kind of leads into my next story, or do you have one? This is in Louisiana.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me continue, because we're on a thought process here.
Yeah.
So Louisiana House passes an unbelievably stupid bill that classifies extremely safe abortion pills as a controlled dangerous substance.
Yeah.
So there are no words, I'm quoting here, for how dumb this is. And what they did, this is kind of interesting. The lawmakers who cited how dangerous this was from their point of view went to a study that was done in Finland, in Helsinki, Finland, at the university or a hospital in Finland, of 60,000 women in Helsinki. Medical doctor who has been prescribing the abortion pills. Again, this was in the year 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And the word that he used was, they were classifying women to put them into categories to see how safe it was. And he used the word hemorrhage. And hemorrhage to a medical doctor means blood of any amount. Whereas to a lawmaker, they took this as, the person's bleeding out and they're going to need to have a transfusion. They're going to be dead soon. So the problem is, he clarified it in this document. And if you read through it, he clearly defined what a hemorrhage was and just how safe the pill was back then. Lawmakers and others, I'm assuming, religious groups, have taken one or two sentences out of context and made it look it's extremely dangerous. So there have been recent studies, more recent studies. The last one that in the article, the references I put was from UCSF Med Center. And turns out this is one of the safest methods. And all the arguments about women having psychological issues, nightmares, turns out not to be true in both studies.
Yeah.
So that's not to say there aren't a few women that have issues, but for the vast majority, this turns out to be one of the safest drugs and one of the safest methods ever. So, here we have lawmakers that are taking things out of context, or to quote the physician out of Helsinki who authored the document, who knows? And by the way, he's been working with methylprestone for over 30, 35 years. So do you go to an expert or a lawmaker who's just read a report that has no medical background and accept that as fact?
Well, sure, because, well, they don't actually believe in fact or trust science. They
Right,
take a
right.
religious position, or
Yeah.
really a political scam position where they're going to pretend to hold a principle in order to win. And they just
Right.
have the thin veneer to cover it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is a fundamental problem, right? Now we've got, like, I remember, Donald Trump has been having his trial, and outside there's like one Trump supporter. And he says there were thousands of them and the police kept them 4 blocks away so you can't see them, which is clearly not true. But
Total bullshit.
you say it, and then they repeat it on Fox News, and like 40%
Yeah.
of Americans believe it. And another one that just came out, right, is when they did the FBI search warrant on Mar-a-Lago, they were there under standard conditions, which means they had guns and they have authorized to use lethal force if necessary. And he said, they went there to assassinate me, which is, complete garbage too. But he's fundraising off that, and a large portion of America believes it. When he was in New
Yeah.
Jersey, they carefully did it when he was in New Jersey to avoid any arguments like this.
Yeah.
And they didn't
Yeah.
have any more ability to use lethal force than they ever do. I mean, they carry guns. Cops and FBI agents carry guns. They're authorized to use legal force. That's how it works.
Yeah. Look, if they were going to assassinate him, why didn't they do it?
Well,
They had the guns. They
they
had the
carefully
opportunity.
arranged not only to do it in the most inoffensive, unthreatening way possible, but also to do it when he was out of town, just to avoid this. And it didn't do any
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So, we hear police raids going on where police have the wrong house. They break down the door of an elderly couple,
Oh, yeah.
something along those lines. And, as horrible as that sounds, if the police are breaking down the door of the correct home, they are met a lot of times with opposition and they do get shot.
Well, yeah, and these no-knock warrants sound kind of crazy. I know, and that's the
Yeah.
problem. Sometimes it goes wrong.
Yeah, it does go wrong. And, we're in the Bay Area, and not too long ago, there were 4 police officers that were executing a search warrant. And I think they shot and killed an innocent person who is in the correct apartment
Yeah.
that they were going into, but 4 of them got shot and killed.
Oh, yeah. And there's of course the cases where they're outrageously violent towards a black person because they're just racist or something. I mean, just like the FBI and the priests, there are bad cops out there doing bad.
Yeah.
That's why if they would actually make them wear body cameras and actually not let them cover up the footage,
Right.
it would probably really help.
Right. And again, this is not to say there aren't good cops,
Yeah.
but we always typically hear about the bad cops.
Well, yeah. And that's why, anyway,
Yeah. You got another story.
I just got one more simple one.
One more. Okay.
California has proposed a bill, which apparently has already happened in Europe, where your car should beep at you to warn you when you're exceeding the speed limit. Which is
I heard about this.
and then apparently you can turn it off if you hate it. But this does seem like an interesting idea. Although I remember this used to be a thing I would puzzle my students with. I would say, what's the most common crime in America? And they had no idea. They would say something like murder. And I'm like, are you kidding?
Oh, no.
And I said, this is one you see 100 times a day, is exceeding a speed limit. Everybody does it all the time, everywhere. So it's the most common crime.
Yeah. So, Sam, if you go back to the 70s, I remember cars where you had a little dial where you could adjust like an alarm clock, old-fashioned alarm clock, so that you could set it to whatever the speed limit was.
Oh.
And if you exceeded it, a buzzer would go off.
Well, that's what this is. I never had a car like that, but they're proposing to require this in cars, which I'm not sure, but it would be a big change. I mean, I don't know anywhere in America where anybody stays under the speed limit.
Yeah.
Everywhere I know, if you actually, I sometimes drive the speed limit and everybody gets mad at you.
Oh,
What the
you're
hell's
one
wrong
of
with you?
those.
I know. What kind of idiot are you? You're in the way. Honk, honk, speed up. What's wrong with you anyway?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I will admit 100 miles an hour on the Bay Bridge or something like that is a little excessive.
Yeah.
But 10 miles over seems to be acceptable. I
Oh,
will
yeah.
say, I think in California, the highway patrol is starting to ramp up surveillance, and I'm seeing a lot of people pulled over.
Well, I would love to see that because ever since the pandemic, people are just going 100
Yeah,
everywhere, and there's obviously no enforcement at all, and that's ridiculous.
yeah. Seeing the enforcement's coming around.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for me.
Yeah, it's it for
Anything
me
else?
too. Yeah.
That's it. All right.
Okay. Well, we'll have another one of these on
Yeah,
Tuesday.
we'll have another one on Tuesday, won't we? Oh, and it's Memorial Day weekend.
Is it? Oh, I didn't notice. I never have understood holidays.
Yeah.
Actually, I might be traveling on Tuesday, so it might be late. We'll plan it out.
All right. We'll plan it out.
All right. I'm going to stop this one.